DC Mayor Muriel Bowser. Our regularly scheduled program will resume following the announcement.
Good morning, I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm the mayor of Washington, D.C. I'm here to provide an update, to provide the public with the district's posture and update on the acts of domestic terrorism and sedition that unfolded in the nation's capital yesterday. I'm joined by members of my team, including the Chief of Police, Robert Conti, and the Director of Homeland Security, Chris Rodriguez. We are also joined by the Secretary of the Army, Secretary Ryan McCarthy, who will be available to answer your questions as well. I want to begin by thanking DC residents for heeding our call to stay at home during the last 2 days. You did your part to keep our city safe. What we saw was an affront not only to our democracy, but also to our values, the values that make the District of Columbia a welcoming, diverse, and inclusive city. I also want to thank the men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department for responding to the United States Capitol Police's request yesterday for backup and quickly restoring order to the Capitol building. Their heroic acts yesterday demonstrate what true patriotism is. Chief Conti and I joined Chief in touring the city last night and had the opportunity to see our police at work. And so we want to thank them for everything that they do, not only in supporting the federal response, but in keeping our city safe as well. Overnight, as expected, the Congress affirmed President-elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and it is official, that certification. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take the oath of office on January 20th to be the 46th president of the United States of America. We know, and we all knew that the end result of this free and fair election would be the oaths that they take on January 20th. This should send a clear message to our nation and the world that despite actions of an unhinged president and those that believe the baseless conspiracies that have been peddled by him and by other elected officials, that the United States remains strong. Our democracy is prevailing, decency is prevailing, and hope and change are on the horizon. While it seems like a lifetime ago, it was just yesterday that we received the final election results out of the state of Georgia. And I want to congratulate Senator, what I'm going to call him, Reverend Senator Warnock, and Senator-elect Ossoff. I also want to make a few priorities clear for the new Congress that are very important to the district. First, we must get statehood on the president's desk within the first 100 days of the 117th Congress.
DC deserves
Congress must immediately transfer command of the District of Columbia National Guard from the President of the United States and put it squarely under the command and control of the Mayor of the District of Columbia.
Agreed.
The Congress must create a nonpartisan commission to understand the catastrophic security failures that happened at the Capitol on January 6, 2021, both to hold people accountable and to ensure that it never happens again.
Amen.
We must also understand why the federal law enforcement response was much stronger at the protest over the summer than during yesterday's attack on Congress. I also call on the Joint Terrorism Task Force to investigate, arrest, and prosecute any individual who
the reason it wasn't
Capitol,
like people keep sharing the image of the Capitol steps covered in fucking troops. That was after what, days if not weeks of the violent protests that had erupted. That like we didn't have that precursor to all this, and people aren't in the state of mind to process that.
What happened yesterday is what he wanted to happen, and we must not underestimate the damage he can do to
we
our
need to
nation
focus on the
and
fact
our
that
democracy
this is
over
because
the
of
next
Trump,
2 weeks.
those who enabled Trump.
And it's
we need
not
to focus
just the
on that,
president
not
who must be held
side
accountable,
arguments
so too must
about, like, if they
the
were black, this
domestic
would have happened,
terrorists
which isn't
who
the
stormed
case.
the Capitol and threatened
Or at
members
least
of
isn't
Congress.
likely the case.
What happened yesterday is textbook terrorism.
Well, thank you,
Let
Biggie
me
Cheese. I'm glad you think
read you
so.
a definition. It's from the Federal Code of Regulations. It's defined as the unlawful use of force and violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce
Is this terrorism
a government,
she's defining? Yes.
the civilian population, or any segment thereof in furtherance of political or social objectives. The FBI has already set up a website where Americans can report tips, and today MPD is releasing
So many people are
its
getting
own
arrested.
lookout information. Any tips that are
why you wear your
reported
mask,
to MPD
right?
will also be shared with the FBI. So I encourage Washingtonians who can provide information to do so by texting 50411, 50411, or by calling 202-727-9099. We are still in the midst of our response.
Get to it, Reddit.
We have aided the federal government in establishing the security of the United States Capitol. These incidents were contained to the United States Capitol and its grounds. We will review for ourselves what occurred yesterday to commend those who performed heroically and to learn what mistakes were made. With that, I want to ask Chief Conti to provide any update from the Metropolitan Police Department, followed by a situational update from Secretary McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor Bowser, and good morning, everyone. As communities across the country are still processing the images of the violent mob that stormed the U.S. Capitol, I want to start this morning by thanking the members of the Metropolitan Police Department. When U.S. Capitol Police called for assistance, it was you that answered their call without hesitation. Your actions to restore democracy were nothing short of heroic and should be recognized. As MPD members, you serve the DC community each and every day, but yesterday evening, you answered the call to serve all Americans. Many of you here today understand that the district is unique in respect to the number of law enforcement agencies operating in local DC, the many federal buildings and national park lands. But I have seen some misinformation out there that I would like to clear up. MPD's responsibility is to provide public safety services to the vibrant communities that make up this great city. MPD assisted U.S. Capitol Police when they requested our assistance on their grounds. What we did do was restore democracy for all of America and assisted our partners, the U.S. Capitol, and their approximately 2,000 member force by providing a swift response to an escalating situation. MPD members will continue to be responsible for local DC, but we are willing and capable, as we saw yesterday, of assisting our partners at any moment. Again, when U.S. Capitol Police called for assistance, MPD answered the call. I would also be remiss if I did not recognize the support we receive from our law enforcement partners regionally and the DC National Guard assets. Please allow me to provide an update in regards to arrests made by MPD related to unrest.
You have the floor. Go ahead.
There were 68 individuals arrested yesterday evening and into the early morning hours of January 7th. Of the 68 arrests, 60 were adult males and 8 were adult females. 41 of those arrests occurred on U.S. Capitol grounds, and to my knowledge, only one of the arrestees is from the District of Columbia. I just want to underscore that. Only one of the arrestees was from the District of Columbia. However, we still have a significant amount of work ahead of us to identify and hold each and every one of the violent mob accountable for their actions. We have collected numerous images of persons of interest that we are asking the community to help us identify. These images depict individuals engaged in various acts of violence or property destruction, and we have made these images available on our website and social media platforms. We shared these images last night with DC Bids, the hotel associations, and other community partners, along with the FBI. We also have shared these images with the regional airport authorities. As we speak, we have members of the Metropolitan Police Department that are scouring the area hotels.
That was a double.
Businesses,
I'm ordering Chipotle, and also
trying to identify some of these
the
individuals that still may be taking up residence within our city. The FBI, we're working closely with them to aggressively pursue those responsible for these shameful and violent acts. You can help by taking a moment to view them and provide us with assistance. Again, they have been publicly released on our website. Anyone with information on their identities or whereabouts is encouraged to reach out to MPD at 202-727-9099 or text us at 50411. Information can be provided anonymously. In addition to what I've already mentioned, we will also be sending these images out across the country to the FBI offices in every state. We have authorized a reward of up to $1,000 for information that leads to the arrest and conviction of persons responsible.
I'm going to mute this for a second just because they're talking about that. In the video, Evans identifies himself by shouting, "Derek Evans is in the Capitol," and turning the camera on his face several times. A newly elected West Virginia delegate was part of the pro-Trump mob that stormed the Capitol. What a fucking idiot.
And professional police service to our district neighborhoods. Residents and visitors should continue to expect traffic disruptions and a large law enforcement presence in and around the National Mall and U.S. Capitol. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to provide the identities
I don't know if I've ever posted
of the persons that lost their lives yesterday. As I mentioned late yesterday, the Metropolitan Police Department is handling the investigation of the U.S. Capitol police officer-involved shooting that occurred in the House lobby area. The decedent in that shooting has been identified as 35-year-old Ashley Pameton. Ashley, also known as Ashley Babbitt of Huntington, Maryland. This remains an active MPD investigation. There were 3 additional deaths that occurred, which we believe all to be the results of medical emergencies. The decedents have been identified as 50-year-old Benjamin Phillips of Ringtown, Pennsylvania, 55-year-old Kevin Greason of Athens, Alabama, and
3 MAGA folks just
34-year-old
showed up and had
Roseanne
heart
Boylan
attacks.
of Kennesaw, Georgia.
All that
Lastly,
McDonald's
like
and revolutionary talk caught up to them. It was too much excitement.
And our neighboring jurisdictions in Virginia, in Maryland, for adhering to the mayor's and the governor's curfew orders. And now I can turn it over to Secretary McCarthy.
Thank you, Chief Conte, Mayor Bowser. Yesterday was a horrible and shameful day in our history.
Sure was.
But one thing we did see was incredible leadership by Mayor Bowser and Chief Conte, and saw the best of this city. When they called us over at the Pentagon, we started getting awareness yesterday afternoon about the breach within the Capitol, and quickly worked to support, move our resources forward in support of Metro PD and the Capitol Police, and responded, and truly saw some incredibly heroic things from the Metro PD and our DC Guardsmen. Very proud of those men and women. At present, the entire DC National Guard has been mobilized. We have also received the support from the state of Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and New York. There will be 6,200 guardsmen in total by the weekend here at the U.S. and the U.S. National Capital Region, in support of the DC Metropolitan Police Department, as well as the Capitol
Guardsman
Hill Police.
And I get called
at
in
present,
for this shit.
We have over 150 personnel up on the Capitol grounds, and we will have 850 on the Capitol grounds by noon today. At 9 a.m. this morning, we began erecting a 7-foot non-scalable fence, which will be from Constitution to Independence and First Avenue to the in front of the pond right there in front of the Capitol, that road right there. So these personnel and this security measures will be in place for no less than the next 30 days. And
I'm going to do call-ins after this if you guys want to chat.
Support mechanisms in place in constant coordination with the Capitol Police and the Mayor's office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We should have also noted that we are joined by the Deputy Mayor, Roger Mitchell, as well as Chief Donnelly, the Chief of DC Fire and EMS, and we're available for questions.
In the House.
Do we have anything available with it printed? Can we print that? We'll get that to you. Okay, thank you.
Mayor Bowser, given yesterday, I mean, I was
Can
out
you
on the
just-
streets. I saw
Can you
MP,
just introduce yourself
Pete
before?
Montine with CNN. Saw
Okay.
MPD making arrests for the curfew. Saw MPD out at the Capitol. It seemed like MPD was out in numbers, but Capitol Police were not. What do you say to that? How do you classify Capitol Police and their response?
Well, I think that there's going to be a lot of time
No, I'm no
for
longer
us to
IRR
figure out
Beagle.
what happened. Obviously, it was a failure, or you would not have
I've been
had
out of the
police
military
lines
for-
breached and people
Was it 2021?
enter the Capitol building by breaking windows and terrorizing the people, the
5 years.
members of Congress who were doing a very sacred constitutional requirement of their jobs. So clearly, there was a failure there. I think that I won't be able to answer your question right now. There's going to have to be a real investigation into what happened. Yes.
You wish that you got more federal support early on. You sent a letter earlier before the 6th saying we don't necessarily need the federal help when it comes to policing in the district. Do you wish you did something differently there?
Well, let me be clear about what the district's responsibility is. I know that you heard Chief Conte's remarks, but let me step back a little bit. We, of course, have a nearly 4,000 person police department, and we are responsible for policing non-federal properties in the District of Columbia. And that's an important distinction because I think you know part of our founding and the creation of the District of Columbia was the federal government's concern that the local jurisdiction could not overtake the federal part of government. And so the Capitol, the White House, and other federal installations in the district
I think
have
they're talking
their
about that now,
own
AC.
police departments, the United States Capitol Police. And we cannot decide for the Capitol, the members of Congress, that we are going to be their police department. But we stand ready to assist them at any case, and that's why we have so much
So it was
regional
on
planning
the
for
Capitol
for
Police
big
that do
events,
manage the
for
federal government,
demonstrations, for
to
protests
get the DC
that
police
turned
involved.
riotous like this one, for the inauguration, for the 4th of July, you name it. We have a regional cooperation system and planning. Now, as we planned with all of our federal partners for this event on January 6th, I made the decision that I needed MPD to focus on law enforcement activities and being able to respond to any hot spots. And that's why we needed our National Guard, the DC National Guard, to help us maintain a perimeter around our areas of concern. The Capitol Police and the leadership at the Capitol, they did not make the decision to call in guard support. I cannot order the Army, the National Guard, to the United States Capitol grounds. I can in the district with the approval of the Secretary of the Army. So I guess we called up our guard, and we've had guard support throughout our COVID pandemic. But specifically for public safety issues, I will issue an additional request to the Army, which I think I did at the end of December. And the Secretary of Army approved that request, and we put our Guard troops on the ground to support MPD. Yes.
Mayor, you said there was a state of emergency you were declaring for, I guess, 2 weeks. What does that mean, and how is that different from what we would expect anyway over the next 2 weeks?
The state of emergency is a way that I can organize the resources of DC government to move on an emergency basis. So some things that you might expect would have community notice, we may not be able to have that type of notice because we need to move urgently. It helps me organize all of my procurement resources on this issue. That's all administrative. But more than that, it's a notice to the public that we may have to do some extraordinary things to maintain public safety. And a curfew is an extraordinary thing that we have to use to maintain public safety. When I tell residents of the District of Columbia to stay in your home or you could be subject to arrest, that's an extraordinary thing. And the state of emergency puts DC residents, visitors, and our businesses on notice that we may have to do something extraordinary like that, that would require you to stay at home or close your business,
Morning,
or
Lynnie.
stop transit or other public transportation earlier, so that we can maintain public safety in the district.
So it's just so people are kind of aware that things could happen quickly, because obviously you did a curfew like
This did
that
happen
yesterday,
quickly.
right?
We gave about
Like within
4
30
hours,
minutes,
3
this
or 4
crowd
hours,
gathered, like less. Like, the
notice.
mob appeared
It
suddenly.
is important when we do a
There wasn't really
curfew,
time to like, oh fuck,
so
we don't
that
have enough
everything
people
is legal
react.
and the
There was
arrests
time to
that our
save
officers
people.
make are prosecuted. That
Thank you,
we
Ann
follow a
Barrington.
certain protocol. We issued
not
a
usually
public
comfortable leaving it
emergency. We
ungroomed like
justify
this.
why that
I'm trying to
infringement on
take care of
people's
it.
liberty is necessary. We give a public statement that you all carry widely so people are aware. I think we issued several what do you call those? WIA alerts that went out on people's cell phones. That includes district residents and people visiting the district. So we make every effort that people can comply with our public safety order. Yes.
Mayor Bowser.
Just please introduce yourself and your
Ike
network.
Ajaji from Fox 5. There was a moment yesterday when a riot was declared. It was the same type of thing that happened during the summer at the protest. Can you run me through some of the things that can happen when the differences between when you declare a riot and when a state of emergency is declared? Do law enforcement get certain liberties in one thing and the other? Can you
Sure.
just
Let
run me
me ask Chief Conti to talk about that.
Sure. As the mayor mentioned, you know, the state of emergency, it allows the city to do extraordinary things. As she mentioned, the curfew, again, a great infringement, you know, on just the day-to-day business in the city. In this particular case, when a riot was declared, that means that we have
Apologies if I
a
missed the YouTube
situation
chat.
where individuals are actively, violently engaging in crimes. And that's the clear distinction. At the time that the riot was declared, and I believe that was MPD personnel on the grounds of the Capitol that were on the air declaring this a riot. So that's the distinction between the two. Yes.
Now, when a riot is declared, what liberties does that give MPD?
So
per se?
for MPD, it may determine the level of force that we use. So for example, you know, in some cases we may use pepper spray. In a riot situation, you know, we could very well use tear gas or CS gas, that kind of thing. So
And
that would be.
at what time was the riot actually called?
I don't have the exact time that it was, but I can tell you that MPD was requested around about 1 o'clock p.m. is when MPD was requested by U.S. Capitol to respond, and things were already pretty bad at that point.
So my question is, over the summer, when the riot was declared, that gave MPD the chance to use these munitions per se. From what happened yesterday, is there a train of thought possibly that maybe declaring a riot earlier could have prevented some of the things that happened?
Well, no, you can't declare a riot until you have violent acts occurring. And I think that MPD is very careful about when we do declare a riotous situation. I mean, there are situations where we have officers that are having bricks thrown at them, bottles thrown at them, everything, you name it, urine, and we have not in every instance declared a riot. In this one, we had projectiles being thrown at our officers, and we had people trying to breach the United States Capitol, in the nation's capital. I think, if anything, I mean, that certainly warrants declaration of a riot, and clearly we experienced that yesterday.
Yes.
Yes, Michael Bryce Sadler with the Washington Post. For Chief Conti, perhaps Chief Donnelly, the 3 decedents who died from medical emergencies yesterday, have we determined whether they were part of the riots or other people who were on Capitol grounds?
What was that question, Michael?
My question was for the 3 people who died from medical emergencies yesterday.
Thank you.
Yes.
There were a lot of people on the grounds of the Capitol yesterday, and I guess the extent that we can say right now is that they were on the grounds of the Capitol when they experienced their medical emergency.
Okay, but you can't specify
I
beyond
can't
that?
specify.
Okay, and then there was a stabbing yesterday at 12th in Pennsylvania, and separate shootings on 200 K Street Northwest and also 9th and N Street Northwest. Have police determined if any of those were related to the unrest in the city?
It does not appear that any of those were related to the unrest in the city, and those matters are actually actively being investigated, but it does not appear they were related.
Okay, thank
Thank
you. And then for Mayor Bowser, could you talk about how the events of yesterday will impact how the city is preparing for the inauguration?
I can't speak to you with any specifics at this stage, Michael, but we will be looking very closely at what we learned, what's happening at the Capitol, working with congressional leadership and the Presidential Inauguration Committee.
Okay, thank you. And then,
But you did hear the Secretary offer two very important points already. That the fencing that is going up around the Capitol, non-scalable fencing, will be in place through the inauguration, and the guard strength that will be coming on the ground by this weekend, up to 6,200, will be available through the inauguration as well.
Which is a larger composition of personnel than you would have for a standard inauguration.
thank you. And then just one follow-up there for you, Secretary McCarthy. The black fencing, you said at least 30 days or no more than 30 days that will be erected?
At a minimum.
At a minimum. Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
and we'll work that in coordination with the city as well as the Capitol Hill Police.
Thank you.
Yes, Mark.
If you guys have any questions, you're welcome to ask in chat.
Two questions for Secretary.
Or
One,
join the Discord after.
And I tried to follow along. Could you repeat the specifics about the fence? Will it completely surround the U.S. Capitol complex, the fencing? And could you just
Yes.
give those specifics one more time?
Yes. So Constitution to Independence first, and then the road there in front by the pond, it'll be all the way around.
And how high will that be?
7 foot,
7 feet,
non-scalable.
Compare that to what we see at the White House.
This is what was available. We worked through this solution midstream yesterday, and we were on the phones to get, as quickly as possible, a capability in place to extend the perimeter of the National Capitol Complex. We could get as many metropolitan
I don't know if
police
there's still
officers
protests. It
out
sounds
into
like the streets are
so
pretty
that
clear right
in
now.
the event that if this was to recur again or downstream, Chief Conte would have as much flexibility with his police force as possible, and we could take over the static security positions.
And I appreciate it may not have been your decision, and we know it certainly, the chief and the mayor said it wasn't their decision, but what can you tell us about the lack of preparation prior to yesterday on the part of the U.S. Capitol Police, and why in months prior we saw troops surrounding the U.S. Capitol when other protesters were coming, but yesterday we didn't see anything. Why were there no troops or any other backup security there yesterday? Given what we all knew in the public domain, you must have had better intelligence than we did, but we all knew that this was possible, if not likely.
Well, we don't have, we rely on our intelligence from law enforcement and local police, obviously, but with respect to the pre-coordination, to the mayor's point, those things are all being looked at. There were discussions previously with the Capitol Police and others, and no request of the D.C. National Guard were made. Obviously, it is a different branch of government, so we have to be requested to come onto the grounds.
Yes.
Tomato Brew asks.
Washingtonian. Mayor Bowser, correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that with the public emergency, any curfews, business closures, that's going to be kind of a day-to-day decision based on the threat in the city. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
On the curfew question.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
To answer the question from EU, how worried does all this make me as a U.S. citizen? It makes me very worried. Like, we have to handle this so the reason I am so happy that the police didn't unload on these people, as much as I want them to be taught a lesson and shown, hey, you don't get to fucking do this. You don't get to march in insurrection against the U.S. fucking Capitol on the day of the election results being certified. The reason I'm not wishing that the police had unloaded is because we don't need to create martyrs. We don't need to hand them the Boston Massacre on a fucking platter for them to propagandize. They're already going to propagandize the death of that one lady and maybe even the other three, even though they weren't police shooting deaths. We don't need that, right? So I'm thinking of the long term, the future. I want these people to be shown in some way that you can't fucking do this, but at the same time, I want to be mindful of escalations. This could be the beer hall push that Hitler did. Well, it was super unpopular, and he was laughed at, and he went to prison, but eventually like was able to still obtain power, right? Like, I don't want them to have that Boston Massacre. I don't want them to have propaganda to bolster their ideas. Half the country is pissed off about the election. A quarter of that, or a quarter of the country believes that it might have been fraudulent. And probably a decent amount of those people believe that these folks are just, hey, Americans that are seeking the chance to really make their voice heard and not stand for the election being stolen. I don't want them to have that validity. So I'm worried, because this is a very rough situation to handle. And people are getting pissed off that these people weren't shot. People are getting pissed off that there weren't legions of troops standing on the porch. And there are reasons for this. And rather than focus on the fact that we had people attempt to disrupt the democratic process, again, in one of the more aggressive ways that we've seen, not just rhetoric on Twitter, not just these bullshit lawsuits, but actual in-person action. That's what we need to focus on. Not the side conversations about if it was BLM, not the side conversations about why weren't they prepared, which obviously is something that needs to be fucking addressed by the authorities. But let's focus on the fact that there are people out there spreading rhetoric, spreading misinformation that is leading to this. And if we don't find a way to stop it, and that doesn't mean excommunicating half the fucking country, if we don't find a way to stop it that is healthy for our nation, this is going to escalate into something worse. And I don't want that. I don't want to fucking Tim Pool this with like, the Civil War is coming. Like, I want to actually be proactive and pragmatic about it. And I want to address the proper issues the way we ought to address them and make a path forward that resolves these tensions, that makes these people not feel like they've just been pushed aside. And I'm not talking about those people as in those fucking idiots in the Capitol. I'm talking to the people that think, well, isn't this what America's about? Like, no, you fucking turd.
We should all be upset about all of those things. I am heartened that our police and guards people were able to get control of the building and that our lawmakers went back into that building to vote. I'm upset that 706,000 residents of the District of Columbia did not have a single vote in that Congress yesterday, despite the fact that our people were putting their lives on the line to protect our democracy.
Oh, and here's the other thing. Like, I don't like that shot. Like, we want to talk about police violence. I don't like that shot. Like, the reason that the Capitol Police weren't unloading on this group is, one, they could be overwhelmed entirely. Like, so all they're doing is killing people for no reason. Because if they shoot into the fucking crowd and the crowd gets incensed and charges, there were not enough Capitol Police, not enough guns or rounds to stop that mob, right? Two, they had priorities. Protect the senators and the staff and the representatives and the staff, right? Two, prevent further ingress. And three, not create a massacre, right? Those are the priorities. So I think that is a moment of a lack of restraint. All she was doing is crawling through a window. Now, if that was like some safe hold that like they had orders, you cannot let anyone pass this point, then sure. I have no sympathy for that. But I worry about that one person. I'm not worrying about that person because it's like, hey, come on, it was an American. What are you doing? Like, no, you were breaking the fucking Capitol. You might have deserved to get fucking capped. But I'm more worried about martyrdom and the effects that could have. And also, I it's like I've said a few times, they would have let that entire, if it meant not firing a single shot, not escalating things, they would have let the entire building fill up and then moved everyone out as long as senators and staff and congressmen were safe.
I think it's safe to say that, we had certainly people who were like-minded with all the rhetoric that has been going on.
Police trying to hold. No, can you link that, Daily Guardsman? Apparently there are clips of
I won't give credit to
the police trying to hold the barricade outside.
What were the injury numbers, Chief?
For our police officers.
Yeah, and impeaching Trump isn't going to do fucking shit for this.
14 initially, but that number went up to about 56. over the course of the night. And I got to tell you, there was a lot of valiant fighting by the members of the Metropolitan
How do you feel Bastier's take about how to
there.
treat the rioters after this event?
One point,
he was pretty extreme.
Several officers.
I don't know what he said.
As a
I don't think
result
they should be
of,
lynched or any shit like that. Like, I think they need to be arrested. I think they need to be charged. If you want to put sedition charges on them, all for it, 100%. Like, that's how I think we teach these people you don't fuck around. Oh, shit. Yeah, see, here's the thing. Okay, hold on. I'm going to pause this. Hopefully I can pause and then keep it going. Where did that go? Okay, you see this? Is it showing for you guys? Okay, cool. Look at this. This is what you're seeing right here. Like, this, if this is, yeah, because it's daylight. So I think this is before they end up getting up there and getting in. Yeah, so you're seeing it break. So let's go ahead and, can I rewind this? I don't know how to use this. Oh, it's on here. Okay. Like, so what you're seeing here, something to really focus on. These people are trying to stop this, right? This mob, I remember seeing like a Twitter post or something an hour before this where there was a small gathering and the person's comment was like, expecting more to show up later, but it's relatively quiet here right now. This was like 30 minutes or so after Trump finished speaking. These people showed the fuck up real quick, right? It's hard to fucking react to that. And there were Trump marches in the past, like couple months after the election that didn't devolve to this level of fucking crazy, right? So we're not dealing with weeks of riding around the country or days of riding around the country where the DC had a bunch of cities that had peaceful protests mostly had to like arm up just in case, border up businesses, whatever, right? So we have that to consider as one reason why they might have been underprepared for this. Two, when threats are made for a long, long time, complacency is a problem. Being able to protect against multiple targets, whatever. Now, I don't know, because I haven't seen anything on it, to what degree they had actually talked about going to the Capitol. And I don't know the rhetoric they used, or not rhetoric, I don't know what language they were using, like saying, hey, we're going to protest at the Capitol, hey, we're going to storm the Capitol, whatever. But I've seen some reports on Twitter saying that that this was planned out in the open. But again, there's a lot of like preparation for violence and expectations of psycho behavior. There was during the BLM riots, and there have been during the DC things. When Proud Boys come to DC last couple times, I've heard nothing but, hey, be careful, warnings, government, stepping in and giving calls to be careful from citizens and sometimes curfews and all that other shit, right? So, with that, there are discussions to be had about preparation and whatnot. But from this video, the thing to take away is that this happened fast. This happened quickly. And we have to think about how are we going to handle this.
I have one officer who's still in the hospital right now. He was snatched into a crowd. He was beaten. He was kicked. He was tased several times.
Oh, yeah, Bastier is right. They should be punished to the full extent of the law. It should be called insurrection.
Very hard,
it should be called an attempted coup. It should be called,
that's correct.
Hell, even treason. Do I think they all need to be fucking put to death? No,
Yes.
but I'm also against the death penalty.
Okay, clarification on the arrests. I'm seeing that 25 arrests were made for curfew violations and unlawful entry on the Capitol grounds. I'm wondering if there were any arrests made just for unlawful entry.
I think I saw an estimate that there were 100,000 out there, during the
violations.
time
So
the riot was going on.
all the arrests that occurred after 6 p.m., the initial group of 25
Thanks,
or 26, whatever it was, those arrests were right on the Capitol grounds. This was after the mayor's curfew was in effect. We gave the order. Individuals were still there, which we're required to do. We gave the order. Individuals were still there, and we placed those individuals who were there, we placed them under arrest. MPD was able to do that. So that was really kind of the balance. And the goal was for us, as we were able to secure the perimeter and have a strong perimeter, to make arrests and then start working our way out. The balance of that was as MPD members worked through the streets of the District of Columbia to ensure the safety and security of our businesses and residents, especially in the immediate areas surrounding the Capitol and some of the areas where we know that some of the people that were involved in this were congregating. MPD members were able to make additional arrests over the course of.
When I do
of the night.
politics, yeah, it gets up there,
Arrests
GTD.
made for those who unlawfully enter the Capitol
Thank you for
building
the
until
compliment.
6 p.m.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay, and then I think people are a little confused at just the low numbers of arrests that were made. There's videos of hundreds of people coming into the Capitol. Can you explain a little bit why those numbers are so low? What happens? Do people leave? Is this an issue of not having enough people to manage it?
No, sure. I can tell you, I mean, probably not many people in this room have been in the midst of a riot or an insurgence like that. And the first thing that you have to do is to regain control. You have to establish control of the situation that was going on. The men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department went into a situation that was already out of control. So once control was established and that perimeter was established, then and only then are we able to safely make arrests. Because as you begin to make arrests, now we get into additional use of forces, additional injuries of officers, and potential additional injuries of the people that we intend on arresting. We have a responsibility to ensure the safety and security, abide by the Constitution and all of that, and we intended to do that. So we made the arrest that we made.
Fuck
in front of
you,
the Capitol.
Ian, you
After
dumb
that,
motherfucker. Ian Miles Chong, sorry, it's a pain in the ass for me to show you Twitter. Ian says, the woman who was shot and killed inside the Capitol building has been identified as Ashley Babbitt, a wife, a friend, a daughter, and a 14-year Air Force veteran. Also a fucking insurrectionist, you dumb fucking twat. I'm tired of Ian, claiming to be this weird foreign conservative entity who loves America and American democracy, and yet he has zero intelligence or integrity to identify someone who is fighting against those things he claims to love about America. Insurrectionist. Part of a riot that sought to overturn a democratic election.
Gone differently for you? What would you have been able to do differently and on what kind of a timeline?
I don't think they should have an inauguration
would be,
publicly because of this. I think there should be curfews, lockdown, and
or before then,
probably no gatherings of any sort in D.C. until he is
right now to give
elected.
the mayor control of the D.C. National Guard. What's different is we would not make a request to the Secretary.
It was
of the
annoying
Army
listening
for
to him talk to
guards
Destiny.
Support. We would not be restricted in any way from how to deploy the Guard. So we wouldn't have to clear a deployment plan with the Secretary of the Army. We could be nimble in how we change it. If we have a deployment plan that was approved, for example, that limited the Guard to the traffic box or to 9th Street, if we find out during the course of the response that needs to change dramatically, then I, as mayor/governor, would make that determination. That's the big difference. What wouldn't be different as governor would be my ability to put the National Guard on the Capitol steps. I wouldn't be able to do that as governor, nor would I be able to use our state police.
What does it mean on Twitter when someone replies to me, but I can't see it?
That wouldn't be different either.
Did they reply and then block me, or?
Yes, and we're going to take one more
Sometimes
round.
I see likes too, and then I go to my my likes and I don't see anything.
Images are going around on social media of some of the protesters and rioters celebrating indoors at the Alibi Bar, as well as the lobbies of some hotels across town, packed into crowds, not wearing masks. What is going to be done? What kind of fines are going to come to these businesses? I realize that the hotels can be a trickier situation, but with the Alibi, that is a bar that allows for indoor dining, indoor drinking.
For 2 seconds. Hopefully they don't say any gamer
we'll
words on this stream, but I got to go get my groceries off the porch.
I saw one, for example, when we were driving around where that was the case. There may be hotel guests, and we will see what violations of their business license occurred. Any other? Yes, Mark.
Question for you, Mayor, and a question for the two gentlemen. Mayor, and I know you've been asked this in one way before, but what is your fear, after seeing what we saw yesterday, what is your fear that could happen on January 20th, and what steps might you take that we haven't seen thus far that you might be considering to maintain the peace? And do you think there should be a public ceremony?
Well, Mark, I think that we're obviously concerned about the 20th. We're concerned about the days leading up to the 20th. But I think we as Americans have to also ask ourselves, is this going to be a new normal in America, regardless of if Donald Trump is the president. Are people still going to be inspired to violence and to try to overthrow institutions of our government? So I think that frame for everybody has to reset, because it may not end on the 20th. And so that, for us, as we think about it as the nation's capital, that means a whole different level of policing. I sit before you right now with a force that's 3,700 strong, but shrinking. I sit before you with local laws that affect how we approach First Amendment demonstrations that may turn to riots. I sit before you with a $100 million bill that the federal government owes us from the last 4 years of helping the federal government police First Amendment demonstrations that are increasing in number and complexity. So all of those things, as we move forward, not just for the 20th, but as the mayor, the chief executive of the nation's capital, host to the federal government with a force that supports federal forces, we have a lot to think about if this is going to be a new normal in America.
If I could follow with the chief and the secretary about intelligence, what can you tell us about the intelligence you had leading up to yesterday, and was there any intelligence that suggested that there would be an attempted breach of the U.S. Capitol?
There was no intelligence that suggested there would be a breach of the U.S. Capitol. The intelligence leading up to that, we won't talk specifically about the intelligence that we had, but we anticipated certainly that there would be an increased number of people into our city. In comparison to the previous two demonstrations, we certainly knew that. But in addition to that, the Metropolitan Police Department, under the mayor's leadership, not only did we activate the National Guard, but we also initiated mutual aid with several area law enforcement agencies before yesterday. So I think that's a really important note to make in terms of our preparation for this. So based on the intelligence, not only did we have the National Guard, but we had the National Guard and we had mutual aid services for D.C. residents, for Washington. I mean, that's really, really, really important. So I'll leave it right there.
And that was why Chief Conte requested us to support traffic control points at 30 separate locations on the north side of the city to prevent vehicular movement. We're still performing that mission. I was remiss not to mention that at the beginning. We have 850 on the Capitol grounds, as well as 90 additional personnel, 3 per location at traffic control points, largely on the north side of the city, from about 9th to 17th northwest. With respect to the posture leading in, we receive our intelligence from law enforcement agencies, whether they're federal or local.
They forgot some shit from my order.
There was the going in position that it would be somewhat similar to November 14th, December 12th, where the types of groups that were there, but had no wildest imagination that you could end up breaching the Capitol grounds.
Okay, that's our update. Thank you, everybody.
My name is Lucky, and please subscribe to my channel, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. I need your subs and I need your support so I can grow my shit bigger. Please, oh please, I don't need donations, just need your follows and adorations. Please, 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 like, subscribe, and follow.